Immediately after I blew out the candles on my 50th birthday cake, I proclaimed to everybody at the table that I was going to make age 50 to 75 the best years of my life. Now, this confused my older brother. He looked at me and said, "But haven't you had a great life?" And he was right. I did have a great life. It was fine. But what I had learned about myself in this era of time was that I had spent 5 decades playing it safe. I had spent a lot of time surrounding myself with a comfort zone. Now, by definition, a comfort zone should be comfortable. It makes you safe. It allows you to go through the day-to-day. However, a comfort zone is also limiting. And I mean, I did all the things that society said you should do. Be nice to others. I did that. Work hard in school and go to college. I did that. Get married and raise a family. I did that, and all of these things were great. However, I realized that by always playing it safe, I had held myself back from living the adventure that I wanted to live. So I decided I was gonna change. And as I looked back, there were so many things I didn't do because I was worried what people would think about me, or I was worried about failing, or I was just scared. When I was in college, a bunch of my friends went skydiving. That sounds awesome, right? Yeah. Except for the fact that I have a paralyzing fear of heights. So instead of admitting to my friends that I was scared of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, I instead made up an excuse that I had a family commitment and had to return to my parents' house that weekend. I did the same thing throughout my career. I never applied for a job unless I was sure that I checked all the boxes for what they were looking for. And I knew that I could nail the interview, and if I got the job, I would be successful. But because of that, while I had a good career, I failed to pursue things that I wanted to do. And going back as a kid, I wanted to be an actor or a comedian, and I never even tried. And here's the worst part. I grew up in Los Angeles. The author, C.S. Lewis, says, "You can't go back in time and change the beginning, but you can start today and change the ending." And that's what I wanted to do. So a week after making this proclamation, I found myself at a conference in Las Vegas. And the people I was having dinner with the night before had participated in an attraction in Vegas called the Sky Jump at the Stratosphere Hotel. This is a 108-story jump off a platform on a tower where you basically free fall for about 20 seconds and then land softly on the ground because of tension wires. They told me, "You should go do that." No. Did I mention I was scared of heights? And then I remembered eating the birthday cake and thinking about that proclamation. This was the exact reason I should do that. So I got in a taxi down the strip to the Stratosphere Hotel. I went up to the counter for the attraction called the Sky Jump, and I asked them, is there still room to do this today? And the woman behind the counter said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're all sold out for today." Oh, darn. And then she immediately looked at a young man who was walking into a door and she said, "Hey, Billy, do you have room for one more in this group?" And I'm standing there thinking, no, Billy. And Billy said, "Yes, come on." So I paid the money, I went into the room with Billy and went through what I thought was far too short of a safety explanation for what I was about to do. Then they took me up, and the whole group, up in an elevator, and one by one, I watched people step off this platform. Now, they explained to you that this attraction is called the Sky Jump, not the Sky Push, which meant you had to take the step. And then they pointed out there was an exit with an elevator down, and they explained to everybody there was no shame in taking the elevator down. It was my turn. I got to the edge, I held onto the rails, and the trainer behind me said, "Are you ready, Tom?" Clenching everything. He said, 1, 2, 3, go! And I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And you know what? There is no shame in taking the elevator down. A week later, though, I decided I had to do something else to live up to my proclamation. So a week later, I declared I was going to run a half marathon. But here's the interesting thing. I had never run a mile in my entire life. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait a second, Tom, what about when you were in high school and they had the presidential fitness test where you run a timed mile every year and they see how you did? Yeah, well, back in the 80s, the presidents didn't care about our health. I had never run a mile. But I read that if you could run a mile, through interval training of going out a little more every time, you could train for a marathon in less than 6 months. I only was going to do a half marathon, 13.1 miles. So I went out for my first run. And at the end of that first run, I still had not run a mile in my life. In fact, I don't think I made it a quarter mile. Every day I went out, and it took weeks to get to that mile. Some days I would do the training and I would run and I would reach my destination of how far to go. Other days, I would reach the corner of my block, but I kept doing it. And 6 months to the day after my 50th birthday, I completed the 3M half marathon here in Austin, Texas. As I crossed the finish line, I thought, oh my gosh, I did that. This was a big deal for a kid who had been picked last for every sport in junior high and high school. This was an accomplishment. So then, over the next few years, I continued to do things that scared me, that seemed fun for other people, but I would never do. I continued to push myself out of that comfort zone. And I started to discover that while sometimes things are scary, they can also be awesome. I went ziplining at Pikes Peak in Colorado. I went whitewater rafting in Costa Rica. I learned to play chess. I rode an ATV through the mud. I did all kinds of things. And it allowed me to grow. But the biggest thing that I've done through all of this adventure was 5 years ago. I was going to be in New York City. I was going to be there for a business trip. And I called a friend because I had a free night just to get together for dinner. And this friend of mine, he is a professional speaker, but he's also a professional comedian. And he said, oh, the night you're going to be here, I'm doing open mic night. Why don't you come with me? That sounds awesome. I love comedy. Wanted to be a comic when I was younger. And I thought, this is awesome. I've gone to a lot of comedy shows, but I've never seen a comic actually work on new material. And I told him, I would love to see you do this. And he said, Tom, that is not what I'm inviting you to do. I'm inviting you to write a 5-minute set, put your name on the list, and get up on the stage at the comedy club and perform your own stand-up. No. I was 52 years old. Even though I had wanted to do this, that ship had sailed. And comedy is the hardest use of the spoken word. And if I was going to do this, which I wasn't going to do this, I would not do it in a comedy club in Greenwich Village. No way. And then I realized that I had made a commitment to myself years before to try new things, especially if they were out of that comfort zone and if they scared me. So I called my friend and I asked for some advice. I wrote a 5-minute stand-up set. I got to New York, I met my friend, I put my name on the list, and it was a room fully packed, about 50 people. Half of them were comedians. All of them were young, and I was convinced they were all going to judge how horrible I was, and they were going to be like, hey, who brought their dad? Because I was twice their age. I almost crossed my name off the list, because I thought sitting in this club, watching the open mic night, and enjoying my 2-drink minimum was going to be a lot safer than getting up on that stage. But then they called my name, and I walked to the center of the stage. I put my notes down on the wooden stool, and I told jokes. And people chuckled. I mean, this wasn't belly laughter. If Jerry Seinfeld had been in the audience, he would not have been worried about job security. However, I did it. I got back to my chair, and I thought, I did that. I got home and I told my wife, this was scary, but it was exhilarating, and I made another proclamation. I told my wife, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to go do 100 open mic nights. In the time since then, I have now done over 160 open mic nights. Thank you. I have been selected by promoters to be a featured comic in 6 comedy shows here in Austin. And then Netflix called. Apparently, I share my password with too many people. I did not get a comedy special. And I am not trying to become a professional comic. But by going out time after time, and sometimes not even doing that well, sometimes telling jokes to a room full of crickets, just chirping away, no chuckles, no laughters, but then other times doing very well, it has taught me to push through and keep trying, to keep trying new things. But just because you proclaim you're gonna make a season of your life the best years of your life doesn't mean it's that easy, and doesn't mean it's always gonna work out the way you wanted. You see, sometimes things get hard, and sometimes there's things outside of your control that you cannot predict. In March 2020, the COVID pandemic hit, and we were all asked to go home, to socially distance, and so many of those routines that we participated in were over. And at the time, I owned my own business in a face-to-face industry, which meant over the next 2 years, I watched my income, my self-esteem, and my confidence evaporate. And I found myself in a mental health crisis. Now, I have always been the guy who saw the glass as half full. I had never experienced feelings like this, and they started to get out of control. And I realized this wasn't right, and I realized I couldn't do it alone. So I reached out to my wife and to some friends, and I told them I was struggling. And they were there for me. However, it soon became very clear that the support of my family and friends was not gonna be enough. And I was gonna probably have to go see a therapist and seek professional help. For someone in their 50s, in the way I grew up, you didn't do that. You sucked it up, buttercup. You worked through your problems. So this was very, very difficult. But I made the call, I got an appointment, I drove to the therapist's office, and I sat on that comfy couch, and I told a stranger how I couldn't cope and how worthless I felt every single day. When I said I was looking for new experiences, this wasn't what I had in mind. And then my therapist and my physician decided, after diagnosing me with depression, that it was probably in my best interest to go on depression medication, to go on antidepressant drugs. This scared me. It frightened me to the core. It made me feel small, and it made me feel like a failure. But I kept going back every 2 weeks to my therapist. I took the medication. I did the homework that they prescribed, and I worked at finding that self-confidence again. Now, I will tell you, I am not an expert in mental health, but I do believe the fact that I had gotten into the habit of pushing through hard things, admitting things were hard, and trying my best to go, whether it was running day by day, quarter mile, half mile, 2 miles, etc., or whether it was standing up in a comedy club and telling jokes to a bunch of young comics who didn't think their dad was that funny. I think that the fact that I had gotten into that habit helped me get through that situation. I will tell you, I am doing better now. And of all the things that I can share with you that I tried that were new, asking for help is the one I am most proud to say, I did that. Because there is no shame in asking for help. So all of us have things that we would love to try, but we hold ourselves back and we play the tape in our mind about why we shouldn't do it, why we couldn't do it, why it's scary. Or maybe we're facing things that are difficult and hard. And when you're in that situation, it's okay to take a pause and think about why am I here? Why am I trying to accomplish these tasks? Take that breath and then decide, if it's the right thing, to take that next piece of action. And that day that I was at the Stratosphere Hotel, 108 stories up, attached to a harness, when they said 1, 2, 3, go, I couldn't move. But then I did this.
Time is 3, 2, 1, go!
One more time.
3, 2, 1, go!
Ah! God damn! Oh my God. Okay, this is cool. Ah! All right, this is not so bad. That was all right. I did that. I absolutely still cannot believe that I did that. So you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start today and find ways to change the future. So what is it that you want to do? Maybe you want to learn to play a musical instrument. You can do that. Or maybe you would like to stand up in a comedy club and make people laugh. You can do that. Or maybe you would like to give your own TEDx talk. I just did that. Thank you.